Madison had always thought of herself as someone who followed the rules. Her life was carefully constructed, each piece fitting neatly into the puzzle she had been building since her early 20s. But as she stood in her dimly lit bedroom, staring into her reflection in the mirror, she realized that the carefully maintained facade was beginning to crack. The emerald green dress she had chosen for the evening shimmered faintly in the soft light, its fabric hugging her curves in a way that made her feel daring, alive even. Her blonde hair cascaded in soft waves over her shoulders, and the delicate earrings she wore caught the light as she moved. Tonight was different, she could feel it in her bones. And it wasn't just the outfit or the makeup. It was the person she was meeting and the conversation she knew they needed to have. Ian had been a part of her life for nearly a decade. He was her best friend, the person she turned to when things went wrong, and the one who always knew how to make her laugh when she needed it most. They had met in college, bonding over late-night study sessions and their shared love of music and travel. Over the years, their friendship had deepened, becoming a cornerstone of her life. But recently, something had shifted. The teasing glances lingered longer, his touch felt more deliberate, and Madison couldn't ignore the way her heart raced whenever they were together. She had spent weeks convincing herself it was all in her head, that she was imagining the spark that seemed to ignite whenever they were near each other. But when Ian texted her earlier that day with an invitation to meet at their favorite lounge, the butterflies in her stomach told her otherwise. The lounge was a familiar haven, its warm golden light and intimate booths offering a sense of comfort and nostalgia. Madison pushed open the heavy wooden door, her heels clicking against the polished floor as she stepped inside. She spotted Ian immediately. He was seated at their usual booth in the corner, his dark hair slightly tousled and his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He looked up as she approached, his eyes lighting up with a warmth that made her breath catch. "You came," he said, standing to greet her. "Of course," she replied, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. "You sounded serious in your message." Ian smiled, gesturing for her to sit. "It's been a long week," he admitted, his tone softer now. "And I realized I missed talking to you." Their conversation flowed effortlessly, as it always did. They talked about work, shared stories from their past, and laughed over memories that only the two of them shared. But beneath the surface, Madison could feel the tension building. Ian's eyes lingered on hers a moment too long, and when his hand brushed hers as he reached for his drink, the contact sent a spark through her that she struggled to ignore. The air between them felt charged, each word and glance layered with meaning that neither of them was brave enough to acknowledge. It was Ian who finally broke the silence. "Madison," he began, his voice low and hesitant, "there's something I've been wanting to tell you." Madison's heart raced as she looked at him, the intensity in his gaze making it impossible to look away. "You can tell me anything," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Ian took a deep breath, his hand resting on the table close to hers. "I've been lying to myself," he said. "Telling myself that what I feel for you is just friendship. But it's not. It hasn't been for a long time." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Madison felt her breath catch in her throat, her mind racing as she tried to process what he had just said. "Ian," she began, her voice trembling, "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he replied quickly, his eyes searching hers for any sign of rejection. "I just needed you to know. Because I can't keep pretending." Madison hesitated, her emotions warring within her. She had felt it too, the pull toward him, the way his presence made her feel safe and exhilarated all at once. But admitting it out loud felt like stepping off a cliff, with no idea where she would land. Finally, she took a deep breath and met his gaze. "I've been feeling the same way," she admitted, her voice barely audible. The admission seemed to break the last barrier between them. Ian reached across the table, his hand covering hers. The touch was electric, sending a jolt of energy through her. "Then let's stop pretending," he said softly. They left the lounge together, the cool night air brushing against their skin as they walked side by side through the quiet streets. Neither of them spoke, the silence between them filled with unspoken promises. When they reached Ian's apartment, he paused at the door, his eyes searching hers for permission. Madison nodded, her heart racing as he pushed the door open and led her inside. The apartment was warm and inviting, the faint scent of sandalwood and vanilla lingering in the air. Ian turned to face her, his gaze intense as he stepped closer. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice filled with both hope and uncertainty. Madison didn't hesitate. "I've never been more sure about anything," she replied. The first kiss was hesitant, a gentle exploration that quickly deepened into something more urgent. Ian's hands cupped her face as he pressed her against the wall, his lips trailing fire down her neck. Madison's fingers tangled in his hair as she gave herself over to the moment, her inhibitions melting away under the weight of her desire. Their connection was electric. Their bodies moving together with a passion that neither of them could deny. The kiss deepened, their bodies pressed together as the tension that had been building for months finally erupted. Ian's hands moved to her waist, pulling her closer, as if he feared she might slip away. Madison felt her heart racing, her skin tingling under his touch. She had imagined this moment more times than she cared to admit, but the reality of it was far more intense than she had ever anticipated. Every brush of his lips, every caress of his hands, seemed to ignite a fire within her that burned brighter with every passing second. Ian guided her to the couch, his movements slow and deliberate, as if he were savoring every moment. They sank into the cushions, their lips never breaking contact, their hands exploring each other with a hunger that bordered on desperation. Madison's mind was a whirlwind of emotions, desire, anticipation, and a hint of fear. But as Ian's lips trailed down her neck, leaving a path of warmth in their wake, all her doubts melted away. She felt alive in a way she hadn't in years, as if every nerve in her body had been awakened. Their passion carried them through the night, their connection growing deeper with each touch, each whispered word. Ian was both gentle and commanding, his touch igniting a fire within Madison that she hadn't felt in years. She reveled in the way he made her feel. His hands and lips exploring every inch of her as if he were trying to memorize her. Time seemed to stand still as they lost themselves in each other, the outside world fading into oblivion. As dawn began to break, the first rays of sunlight filtering through the curtains, Madison lay tangled in the sheets, beside Ian. Her head rested on his chest, her fingers tracing lazy patterns on his skin. She felt a sense of contentment she hadn't known in years, a warmth that filled the empty spaces she hadn't even realized existed. Ian's arms were wrapped around her, his hold firm yet gentle, as if he were afraid to let her go. "I don't want this to be just one night," Ian said softly, his voice breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. Madison looked up at him, her green eyes searching his face for any sign of hesitation. "Neither do I," she admitted, her voice trembling. "But what happens now?" Ian smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We figure it out," he said simply. "Together."